Hello, friends. Hello, everybody out there in listening land.
Welcome back.
So today, we are going to talk to you about a little TV show.
It's so generous to call it a TV show.
It really is. As you can probably tell by the title of this episode, we are going to be talking about the Disney Plus TV show Star Wars Galaxy of Sounds. Which came out last year. And specifically, we're going to talk about episode 5, which is called Beeps. And
that's actually better than what we're actually going to
2 minutes into the 12-minute montage of just all the droids beeping, there is a cutaway to Dexter Jettster's 1950s robot cafe.
That's right.
On Coruscant from featured in the film Attack of the Clones. So all you Dexter Jettster heads out there, there's some new Dexter Jettster content.
Beep heads, check it out.
No, I do bring this up at the beginning of this because I think I talked about a long time ago in a Patreon episode, I'd stumbled across it on Disney Plus. They had this Star Wars biomes show, which was just a empty nothing, just screensavers or whatever. And I found another one that's somehow even worse. That's called Star Wars Galaxy of Sounds. And we just watched 2 minutes in total out of this whole thing.
We watched a lot of it.
There's I think there's 7 episodes, and the titles of them are Wonder, Excitement, Dark Side, Light Side, Beeps, Connections, and Oddities. And the idea is each one is like a montage of the actual clips from the various Star Wars movies and TV shows and other properties and stuff that then are somehow categorized. And the Beeps one, I just started watching it, and I when the Dexter Jettster thing happened, something really broke in my brain.
You
and I was
snapped.
I went full on fucking Joker mode. I was just cackling and giggling, and just something. It just felt like my life had been ruined. It was irreparably. I couldn't bring it back. And the reason why I'm setting us up by talking about all of this is that we earlier that day, so yesterday, while me and Carrie have been packing up for our big move, we put on finally the entirety of The Queen of Versailles Reigns Again, the reality TV show centered around Jackie Siegel and her attempts to finish this insane big house. It's
first of all, don't watch it.
No, it really sucks. It's really I only have a certain level of tolerance for and I know I literally just said I watched Beeps, but I can kind of get into some of it. I've never really been a big fan of reality TV.
You love
sort of
Breaking
in general.
Amish.
That's true because it's offensive.
Yeah,
it's so melodramatic. But my point is, I can see the appeal of certain reality TV shows, even the ones that I haven't particularly gotten into. I get why they're popular. Obviously, Carrie, you have watched a lot of them, and sometimes I will sit with you and watch them, and most of the times I will not.
I am a huge reality TV head, and I think this show is on Discovery Plus, right? The Queen of Versailles Reigns Again. Yeah. So it's we have a Discovery Plus subscription because I watch so many Discovery Plus shows. I do. And I have a very high tolerance for reality TV. I am just fascinated by what people are willing to do on TV and just the lengths that they will go to get a crumb of fame.
Sure,
and
right.
So my tolerance is super high. I've watched almost every season of The Bachelor. I watch every stupid weight loss show on Discovery Plus, every awful trash tier dating show. I'm not even talking about 90 Day Fiance, but I don't even remember what this one was called. There's one where people are preppers and they're trying to be with people who are not.
Okay, I would
preppers.
watch that. I would watch that.
It's Love Off the Grid. That one's a banger, but I don't think anybody. I've never met anybody else who watches it. But I say all this to say I have a very high tolerance for reality TV, and I enjoy it. It's true. I just do enjoy it. And this was a nightmare. Like, it was a nightmare watching this. There's nothing redeeming about it.
Yeah, and I think too, before that ends up being too tantalizing of like like, oh, it's so awful, whatever. It's mostly really boring. Like there were a lot of moments. Again, it worked out because we had other domestic chores to do.
Yes.
So we just put it on in the background for a long part, and there were like a number of times where we had to like go back and rewatch because we realized like in a 30 to 40 minute long episode we missed like the one juicy thing. Yes. And we're like, oh shit, so we had to like go back. It's mostly pretty boring, but nonetheless, I think there's some interesting stuff for us to talk about with it because this is, has been a long anticipated show for us, and certainly for me.
Absolutely.
Because if you're, a long-term listener to the show, you probably know we've followed the Siegels for quite some time. They initially came onto my radar way back in 2012. When I first saw the documentary film, The Queen of Versailles.
Which is excellent.
Which came out that year, which is directed by Lauren Greenfield, and it's incredible. It's an incredible film, and you can tell by the title of that, this new show is trying to capitalize on that, the main subject, or one of the main subjects of the film, Jackie Siegel, she's like adopted that name, as like, she's like, I'm the queen, I'm the Queen of Versailles. And we also talked at length about that particular film on our episode that we did on the Siegels, which was episode 83 back in July 2021. And then I also gave a bit of an update on them on our 100th Patreon episode, one of the Sicko roundups we did, which was only just a few months ago. It was in February 2022, and talked about some of the things that had happened in between, as well as signaling like, oh, okay, they this show that was always kind of rumored and stuff is coming out. It's going to come out, and then it did. And we finally decided to sit down and watch it. And so what we'll do here is I'll give like a very quick recap of the general sort of background info about the Siegels, which is not really included in the documentary either.
No.
Like this is part of like the Siegels expanded universe. Like you have to like watch all this other stuff to even understand where you are at the starting point of the show. But, in case you haven't listened to those episodes, or it's been a while, a quick recap about the Siegels. So the main guy, David Siegel, is the CEO and founder of this thing called Westgate Resorts, which is this like mega timeshare company. I think it might be the biggest one in the world, or at one point was the largest one, or whatever. But he's
wasn't there a thing in the documentary about how like his sign was brighter than Trump's sign or something?
Yes, yeah. He's in the exact same milieu as like a Trump type guy. He's sort of nouveau riche. He's not quite as wealthy as some of the other guys. He's like a petty billionaire. I forget, like his net worth has fluctuated and stuff because it's all wrapped up in the company.
Yeah.
But he's not like, I mean, compared to any normal person, he's obscenely wealthy. But he's not in like the upper echelons. He's in that like weird, like, he's only like just crossed $1 billion if it's kind of in that range.
It seems like it's gone up and down. Like sometimes it's been over 6 billion, sometimes like 500 million.
You're right. Exactly.
Really difficult for him.
And so, yes, and his life has been one of many trials and tribulations. But he was a real estate developer starting in like the 1970s. He's from Florida. And then in the 1980s is when he founded Westgate, and that was like the thing that really catapulted him and made him obscenely wealthy. He'd been married a couple of times, and he had a few kids, but eventually he marries Jacqueline Siegel, who becomes Jacqueline Siegel, obviously, in the 1990s, and she was a beauty pageant contestant.
And former engineer. And
she does, there's some like kind of interesting stuff about her biography, right? Like she kind of went around and she eventually found like that doing the beauty pageant thing was like a way to change her life in the sense of like basically connecting her to a world of like, extremely wealthy people, one of which that she married.
Right.
And so by the 2000s, David Siegel, but, also them as a couple, they're sort of at the top of this huge empire of real estate and, the timeshare, vacation home stuff, which, in general is a huge scam if you're unfamiliar with them.
I mean, in the original documentary, you can see how they scam people, like, quite blatantly.
And then at sort of the height of their power, they begin construction on this house in 2004. And purportedly, the story is that they went on their honeymoon to France and they went to the Palace of Versailles and they decided they wanted to build one. In Florida. They were like, that's where we want to live. We want to live in a replica recreation of this. So they begin in 2004 building this huge house, and it's the largest house in the United States. That's the sort of hook.
90,000 square feet.
90,000 square feet with all of these obscene plans, and the outside of it, it's a very gaudy replication of the sort of architecture of Palace of Versailles. And then in 2009, when the financial crisis hits, right, it hits the Siegels as well, because all of their wealth and stuff is tied up in this company. They've leveraged everything as collateral to keep going up, and basically the construction on the house stops. And that's what makes the film so interesting, is that that's happens at the midpoint, and then you see they just have this husk of the largest house in America that is just empty and decaying.
It's like a monument to consumerism.
Yes, yeah, it's a fantastic metaphor for the sort of transient nature of worth and power. It's a modern Ozymandias, right? Look on my works, ye mighty, and to spare. And the film ends with this fantastic. One of the the gaudy elements too is that they built it such that on their back patio balcony thing, they would be able to watch the Disney fireworks at night. And so the film ends with this phenomenal shot of just from so inside good. The abandoned husk of this giant structure, you can see the Disney fireworks going off. It's phenomenal.
It's so striking. Lauren Greenfield is a great filmmaker.
Yes, and I think we'll get into it as we talk through it, but that's part of what makes it so compelling and interesting is the framing and the artistry introduced by a talented filmmaker, which is entirely lacking from the show.
No soul, just completely.
So,
yeah.
Again, to catch us up, in the 2010s, they end up recuperating, right? The company gets back on its feet. He becomes obscenely wealthy again. He becomes a big Trump guy. We talked about that in our sort of follow-up stuff as well. He was trying to leverage to become sort of a drug czar advisor, because in the interim period, one of their children overdoses.
Yeah. She's really sad.
Addicted to opioids, and then she overdoses. And so one of the things they've also done in the intervening period is, and it's touched on lightly in the show, and we'll eventually talk about it, but they set up a philanthropic charity for with an emphasis on drug prevention and
Victoria's
drug addiction or
Voice.
Yes, that's it. Anyway, so all of this is all just a recap, stuff you might have known already, and the idea is then by 2020, they decide to finally go back and finish the house. And Jackie is the one that seems to be most heavily involved in this, and she decides okay, we're gonna turn this into a reality TV show, because as we've mentioned before in our previous episodes on them, they also did a couple of other spots in reality TV programs. I think they were on Celebrity Wife Swap.
Yeah, and they were also, Dwight mentioned, on Below Deck. And yesterday while we were watching the show and I was Googling the various idiot sons that she has, there were, they the whole family, I guess, has been on the show multiple times. And one of the sons, I can't remember if it was David or Daniel, apparently has the distinction in the Below Deck fandom of being the rudest person that's ever been on Below Deck. So they've been trying to make the reality TV thing really happen for a while.
Right. It's clear that, and it's funny too, because the film itself, the original film, they got into a fight with the filmmaker. There were lawsuits and stuff. But they and the film it's sympathetic to a certain extent. I think in particular to Jackie.
Yes.
But but it is like, it's not like a flattering portrayal by any means, right? It's reflective. It really gets into this idea of like the American dream and home ownership and these sort of like lost dreams and stuff.
I think it's as sympathetic as it can be, and I think that's what makes it so interesting. Like, you can tell that Lauren Greenfield really put in the effort to make it like more human. Like, she probably imbued it with some sympathy where it might not have existed otherwise. And I think that's part of what made it so affecting.
And I think the other big thing too, that's in direct contrast to the show, is that the film also takes time to like explore the lives of the people around the family, and in particular there's a focus on their sort of like support staff. So the nanny. They have like live-in nannies and maids. They have like a driver who like used to be like a millionaire and like lost all of his money. But it shows like all of the people in the sort of orbit around this family, and the show does not.
Another big difference I want to mention is that in the documentary, Lauren Greenfield did not spare any details about the amount of just fresh dog shit littered all over their entire house. And it's very clear when you watch the reality show. Obviously, like, it's funny looking at the dog shit thing, but you don't see dog shit once, and it just tells you that like this is what Jackie wanted the whole time. She wanted like a show that she would have control over, that like makes her look good. They don't show like all the dog shit everywhere. They don't like make it look bad that she like constantly neglects her pets and her children. It's just all presented in like the most positive light possible.
Yes, exactly. It's just a like a PR, like, look how rich and exciting I am. Look how like sort of interesting this exploration and this attempt to do it is. And so the start of the show, and we're going to go through it chronologically, but just the kind of the giant premise, overarching thing of the show is that like, okay, it's like 2021. It's been now 17 years since they started building the house. It's been in limbo. It's been basically abandoned for a long time, but they want to finally go back and finish the house. David Siegel is almost entirely out of the out of the reality TV series until the very end.
He's in the hospital.
Like, he's perpetually like sick. Like, first he has like a broken back, then he gets like pneumonia. Yeah. And he's also at this point too, he's 86 years old.
He's like he's done.
Yeah, it's very clear that he's going to die soon. And
Fingers crossed.
and that's part of the thing too that Jackie keeps saying, like, she wants to finish the house while there's still time for her to like enjoy it with her husband, right?
Her husband who hates her.
Yes. So she walks into the house at the beginning of the show, and it's like everything is unfinished, right?
Everything's falling apart as well.
Everything's falling apart, and the goal is, okay, it's like the beginning of 2021. By the end of the year, I want to have a New Year's Eve party here. And that immediately, like, she has like all of her fucking various helpers. There's like 12 people involved in the production of this house, and
she has two personal assistants alone, like just as like personal assistants.
She's got two personal assistants. There's like multiple like architects and designers,
contractors, interior
there's like
designers,
an interior designer, and then like the construction contractors. And
it's so many people.
Most of the show is her dealing with that like group of people, then plus her kids, who in the documentary were like, between the ages of like 5 and 12, and who are now all like
late teens and up.
Yeah, late teens to early 20s.
Yeah.
And so they start getting involved. And that's like the main cast of the show. And again, the episodes that we see are basically like we finishing kind of one space at a time. It's sort of like, let's try to finish this room. We know we can't finish it all at once, but let's try to finish this. Let's try to finish this thing. And so the cycle of the way that the show goes is, there's like some silly, like, oh, I'm Jackie, here I am being sort of flippant and funny, ha ha ha. And then it's like a problem is introduced.
It's like really dramatic music, and she's like, I can't believe this is happening.
And there are a number of lines, and I had you start to write them down because we were like laughing so much about it. There are a number of times where they do those like side, confessional interviews or whatever, and Jackie will say something, and I'm just going to read, this is a direct quote from the show. this is a huge problem. Without ventilation, we may not be able to have our Benihana grill.
And I think it's worth mentioning that she makes a really big deal, and they film a whole scene of like they own the biggest Benihana in the world.
Yes,
and so the dream is
in one of the Las Vegas hotels or something.
I think it's the Westgate Resort that might be in Florida. I think, I don't know, but either way, they need to have this Benihana grill in their house. It's the most important thing for the family.
Yes, that's like one of the most interesting arcs of the show is the Benihana grill, because it comes back and forth a couple of times. And again, that shows you in a general sense like how vapid and uninteresting this is, how entirely unrelatable, because every problem that gets introduced is a totally manufactured problem, which is, I guess, something that is in a lot of reality TV show, right? Like manufactured drama or whatever. But this is just like an ostentatious non-problem to be like, how am I going to fit this Benihana grill in my 90,000 square foot mansion?
I think maybe this is like, maybe there is stuff like this in those shows that are about like home improvement. That's like the only kind of reality show that I never really got into. And it's just like, there's nothing interesting about it. Like, there's just not.
Right, I think it's in a way it's trying to do a blend of like a home makeover and then like a lifestyles of the rich and famous type thing. That's like the overall like genre match that's happening here. But the thing is that, again, in the home improvement show, I haven't watched those, but I can imagine part of the idea is it's whatever. It's like the wish fulfillment fantasy. It's like, oh, like I could have like a modest house or something, and how, and I could imagine there's a satisfaction to like refurbing a house or like dealing with a problem with that. I mean, we talked about, there was like a while where I'd found this game that was like House Flipper Simulator.
Oh, right. Yeah.
Where all you do is you buy like crappy houses and then you like repaint them and you redecorate them,
and that's a really popular format for reality shows too. House flipping,
right, exactly. The idea of getting living space and reassembling it. I mean, it's the same impetus, but behind then like a game like The Sims or something, right? It's like, oh, how would I arrange a house? I could kind of understand that on an entertainment level, but it leaves any sense of relatability or interest when the problems are not like, oh, how can I make it so that like these bedrooms are like really done, and it becomes this like granular fucking hour-long thing about like how are we gonna fit a Benihana grill in the house.
I think part of it is also that like there is, like you were saying, like that wish fulfillment element. It might be different if it was just like, here she's like designing the house and it had like more details about, but it's framed also like she's framed as the victim the whole time.
Yes.
Which is just like, get a fucking grip. You're fucking buying a $60,000 chair right now.
Okay, a couple of other problems to rattle off that she says is problems. Another direct quote from the show: "We need to talk. The problem with the marble is really getting out of hand." And that's after she realized she's wasted $9 million on like the external marble to the house,
which is crumbling,
which is falling apart. Another one is at one point she decides she wants like an antique slot machine in her like pub room in the house, but she already owns a lot of slot machines.
A lot.
She has a custom Queen of Versailles slot machine.
But there's a problem.
She says, quote, "The problem is that they're all electronic and computerized."
Disgusting.
And so she has to like go meet like another weird old rich guy who has like a collection of antique slot machines.
That guy did not want to be around her.
Yes. And so, and again, too, a lot of the decision making stuff, right, in terms of like what would be, again, I could imagine theoretically in a show like this be the interesting design choices or picking things out is that like she has a warehouse filled with like millions of dollars of antiques that are just like rotting in storage and have been for like 20 years. And so, it's...
And every time she goes shopping, she spends a couple million on antiques. And it's just to stick it in this like warehouse that's like tens of thousands of square feet.
There's one drama in one of the episodes where she's like looking for a piano, and she like discovers that she owns like 6 or 7
there's like 10 pianos.
Antique grand pianos that are just like wrapped in fucking like, you know, saran wrap and like stuck in their side on, you know, just throughout this like giant warehouse. And the whole time she's being like trailed by her interior decorator and like one of her personal assistants. And they're like, "Is this the right piano?" And she's like, "No." And she keeps
I didn't even know I had this piano.
How kooky is that? And it's just like there's no flair to it. It's just ostentatious wealth.
She just constantly looks at the camera and is like, "It's so funny that I have so many things I don't even know about."
Yes. It's all of the gaudiness and none of the charm.
Yes,
right.
It's totally like, charmless.
It's just. And you know, and the other thing too, in terms of her performance, is that she has these quirks, and she's very quick to remind you that, you know, she came from these like humble origins.
Yes.
You know, she grew up very poor, and so, you know, she has these like aesthetic preferences and behaviors that are sort of tacky or like you know, crass or what have you, and she plays them up as like, oh, how funny is this? Like how like cute and ditzy and like you know, charming is it that I'm like the obscenely wealthy and yet like I want to eat McDonald's or whatever.
Right.
And it's just, I mean, it does not come across as funny. It comes across again as that weird like, I mean, it's like Trump with McDonald's or whatever. It's like, it's not charming.
I mean, her whole life is performing. Like part of the appeal of somebody having like kind of like a homey charm or whatever is that like that's just the way that they are or whatever. This isn't like just the way that she is. She's playing it up and performing it because she thinks it makes her look good. And the reality TV show is like the perfect vehicle to do that because she has like perfect control over it. And even with having perfect control over it, she does not know how to make herself look good.
Right. And again, these are the same kinds of things that do come across as charming in the original documentary.
Yes.
And that's in part because of the artful framing, but also because there's a heavy dose of like reflectiveness in it. And it could also be too that like part of it is that the documentary is like, you know, it's like 90 minutes and it's not all Jackie. The show is pretty much all Jackie.
It's the Jackie show.
And there's 6 episodes in this first season, and they each run between like 30 to 40 minutes apiece. So it was like, you know, what is that? Like over 3 hours of Jackie.
It was too long. It felt like 10 hours.
And it's just, it's at a certain point that there's nothing new. There's nothing new being learned or gained. But let's walk through. I know you took like a lot of notes as we were going through the different episodes,
and so I won't touch on it all because it's just too much.
Yeah, a lot, and again, not particularly. All of it is very interesting.
Right.
It's highly detailed in a lot of like very bland kind of ways. But maybe you want to like give us some highlights. What were some of the things in episode 1 that you picked up on?
So the first thing that I noticed in episode 1, and this is, I think, just because of like my own personality, the thing that most affected me in the original documentary and also affected me a lot watching this. The first thing I noticed was that she had a bunch of new dogs. And again, if you haven't listened to those episodes or you haven't watched the documentary, like it's just constant that like their pets are neglected and dying. It's really disgusting because they have like the means to do that. But a lot of this first episode was just like recapping her lore. I think she talks about like her daughter passing away. She talks about like the 2008 crash. Then they go to that warehouse. They talk about how they're getting a movie theater in the house, an English pub, blah, blah, blah. But when they go to the warehouse, the thing that really stood out to me in the first episode was that one of the stuffed dogs that I believe appeared in the original documentary, she had taxidermied after it died, is just in the warehouse. And she's having this like exchange with her interior designer or her assistant. And they're like, you know, where can we put him? Where can we put the dog? She's like, oh, there's not really anywhere to put him. I guess he's just like going to stay here forever. And it's just like, to me, that's like the ultimate expression of her personality. Because I do think that she like, in the way that she can, loves her pets, but she's just unable to express any of her feelings or do anything outside of the context of consumerism, of turning things into objects and collecting them. Even after they die, she just, all she does is hoard. Like, she doesn't even enjoy the things that she buys. We were talking last night about consumerism, and it's just like, it's like the purest form of consumerism. There's not even like any ideology behind it. She's just like a machine that consumes.
Yes, she needs to buy and acquire new objects and stick them in this warehouse or in her, one of her like ridiculously oversized homes.
Or in her morning kitchen.
We'll talk about the morning kitchen. But yeah, the warehouse stuff is like, it's worth a watch just for one episode, just to get like a glimpse of it. I think you see some of the storage warehouse stuff in the documentary as well. But it's like, it's just so obscene that, again, that you have all of this collection of these, like, priceless valuables, just things that cost more money on their own than, like, I have ever had in my entire life. And they're just sitting there kind of rotting, and then among them, like you said, there's the fucking taxidermy dog.
It's really sick, and I don't think that she's a sociopath. I just think that this is, like, the only way that she knows how to interact with the world. Like, she really seems to just have nothing else going on.
Right. It's like, you can't imagine. I mean, look, we talked about this a little bit while we were watching the show, but like, obviously, and I do think that this is the general appeal of these kinds of shows. Like, obviously, even if you have our politics, there are moments in your life, in your day-to-day, where you might fantasize about like having quite a lot of money, right? Like, and you think about like, what would I do if I was, so wealthy that I couldn't even, think of it. Like, what would be my ambitions? Like, what would be the things that I would want? Right. And it's, obviously not being rich. Like, most of the time those fantasies are occupied around like, taking care of problems.
I would go to the doctor.
A consequence of money. Yeah. It's like, I would like own my own house so I don't have to pay rent.
Right.
Or like, I would go to the doctor, or, I would like, and then there's like a certain upper limit
or whatever.
Right.
Yeah.
I could travel a bit more. I wouldn't have to work. I could pursue the other things that I'm interested in life. And then there's like a certain level on top of that that's maybe like getting into like kind of luxury stuff where it's like, I would have like a nicer TV. I would have like a nicer chair. I would have like a more expensive bed. I would have nicer clothes or whatever. And then there's just like whatever this is, which is beyond then even like the upper echelons of the crazy like fucking fantasy wealth shit, which is like I would buy a giant yacht and I would party on the yacht, or I would make a gold throne that I could sit on. This is just like I would be able to go to Walmart and buy whatever I want and just put it in another Walmart that I own.
She does say that the house is the size of a super Walmart with the auto section and everything is one of the things she said in the first episode.
Yes.
But
yes.
More than that as well, when you were just saying that, it made me think about it's not even for her. It's not even just about like acquiring the things or having nice things. Like a thing that recurs throughout the show is also she wants to have the biggest things. Every time that they like talk about acquiring an item, she wants it to be the biggest one in America. That's why she wants the house to be as big as it is. She wants the TV to be the biggest. She mentions they own the biggest Benihana. Like it's all about how she views herself in relation to other people. And the only way I think that she knows how to feel good about herself is if she has more than other people. It's not even about security or enjoyment for her. It's about I want other people to see that I'm better than them.
Yes, and it's that uniqueness factor, right? It's like I want to do something that's never been done, which is again the case of the Benihana grill, which I think is introduced in the first episode.
I believe it is. Yeah.
The drama is that when they were initially designing and building the house, they wanted to have this like huge commercial kitchen in the house that would be then staffed by whatever their private chefs.
A full Benihana staff in the house.
And the idea was that they would have that in their own house. And so they designed the entire space around that. They built start constructing it. It's already been constructed. Like
except for the actual
20 years ago,
like, cooking items and stuff. It's all constructed.
Right. It's already been built into the house, and then she goes to like a Benihana with her family, and she like she asked the Benihana chef. She's like, "Hey, I'm gonna put this in my house. do you have any like recommendations about that? And the Benihana chef is like, you shouldn't put this in your house.
Yeah.
Because your whole house is going to smell like Benihana if you do. And she goes like, what? And then she goes back to like
this.
Yes, and so then a lot of episode 2 is then she goes back to like her like design team. And that's the other interesting thing here too, is that because the house has been going on for so long and it's such a huge project, there's been like a rotating shuffle of different people coming in to be the point people and design people. It's not like the same team has been working on it for 20 years.
She constantly refers to like bad work done by previous contractors. They don't even know who worked on certain things.
So everything has to be reverse engineered. And because of the sheer scale of the fucking project, it's not like things can be easily swapped in and out. Like every move, if you decide to go back on something, it could cost like millions of dollars. And so, you know, what ends up happening is the fucking, design people there, they're like, you can't put this Benihana grill in your house because it's going to smell. The sound of the ventilation is going to be awful. You're going to hear it throughout the entire house, and there's like no proper way to vent it. And I can't get a vendor to approve installing this.
They can't get the permits to do it.
Right. Yeah. So, and I see you have like one of the lines here. It's one of the like one of her hangers on says, "I know Jackie's priority is to put a Benihana in Versailles."
Everybody knows what a big deal this is, and she keeps saying it's a really big deal specifically to her husband as well. That's like the main thing that keeps coming up.
And so she decides she makes the call. She's like, okay, we're going to have to nix the Benihana. And so they have all this finished work done in the walls, like the venting or whatever, and then there's like a long shot of them like tearing it all down.
All of it.
So there's shit, like the only thing that has been finished in the house for fucking 20 years or whatever, like these elements are now starting to be like broken down.
Millions of dollars in labor and materials and time.
And just the time.
Just wasted. Completely
just
fucking
absolutely wasted. And it was this moment, it made me realize that this is sort of like a modern, less interesting version of like the Winchester Mystery House.
Yeah.
Which we talked about at one point, I think briefly in one of our episodes, maybe on the Gilded Age. But I'm sure people are familiar with this. But for those who don't know, there was the mansion, Gilded Age mansion, made by the widow of the guy who had founded and owned the Winchester Rifle Company.
Yes.
And the sort of like urban legend is that when he died, she started building this house with, the incredible estate that he had left her, and she went slowly mad over a long period of time and believed that the house was haunted by ghosts of everyone who had been killed with the Winchester rifles. And so as the house was, it was like a never fully finished property, because as the house was constantly under construction, it kept growing larger and larger. It became this weird maze that was like a reflection of her own increasing insanity, where she would make these like arbitrary decisions. She would say like stop in the middle of construction on one thing and then like completely redesign it. So it's got all these weird oddities and stuff. And there's a similar vibe to this show, because it's like simultaneously she's like adding in all these crazy design elements, but they're also like destroying all the shit that they've already done in the house.
Yeah.
Was there anything else in episode 2 worth mentioning?
I want to mention before we move on to episode 3, and this was introduced in episode 1, I have to mention the birds. So in addition to all the dogs that she has and neglects, Jackie has become obsessed with the idea of getting birds for her morning kitchen. And if you're wondering what a morning kitchen is, that's a kitchen that's just for her, where her staff is not bothering her, where she can go in the mornings with the heated floor and just, I guess, look at her birds that she has in a big antique cage. And in the first episode, they go to Gatorland, and she says Gatorland isn't just about gators, because she's looking for birds to match the fabrics. And she's talking to these people who work at Gatorland, who probably have like zoology degrees and stuff. And she's like, I need birds that are blue. And it's just like, it's really surreal. And then by the second episode, she has 2 baby toucans that cost $20,000. And they're just like in a corner of the yard, neglected. And she says, we need an aviary.
Yeah, she's like, oh, I can't put these in the morning kitchen.
They don't go.
Them. So now I have to build an aviary on the property for these toucans. Also, briefly, I should mention the heated floor thing in the kitchen. That's a decision she makes on the fly on the show. And part of the impetus, sort of speaking to what we were talking about, she like asks like the designer, she's like, could we get like a heated floor in the kitchen? And the person says like, usually we only put in heated floors in the bathroom.
Right.
And she says, oh, so nobody's done this before. And they're like, yeah. And she's like, okay, I want that then.
She loves that. Yeah.
Yeah.
And then they talk about doing the whole ballroom with a heated floor as well, which is even less.
Yeah. The 50,000 square feet, larger than a fucking football field ballroom she wants to do with a heated floor. All right, let's move on to episode 3, which you have titled the dog funeral episode.
That was so affecting for me, man. That was like her dog just dies in this episode.
Yes. Her long-term dog, Bear, who's 13 years old, who is the little like white, I don't know, what do you call him?
I think it's a Pomeranian, maybe.
Yeah, it's like it looks
she branches like out into other types of dogs in this show. Like they have a golden retriever, but before this and in the documentary, all the dogs are like white Pomeranians.
Yeah, so and it's the one where often if you've seen like pictures of her, the sort of the cover of the show, as well as I think in the documentary she has this like little, white fluffy Pomeranian, and I believe this is like her primary one.
He's 13.
Yeah, and he dies like on camera. Like we see him start to die.
It's
and they
so
send
bad,
him to the vet.
dude.
And then they have to put him down, and so they decide to have a dog funeral, and she like puts the dog in a dog coffin and then puts the coffin in like a large freezer that she has, and then she like gathers all of her children. She waits for like a couple of days so that they all can be present, and she's like, okay, let's go like bury the dog now. And at one point, like one of her sons comes in and is just like very seriously like, we finished digging the dog grave, Mom. So
this is like the 50th dog grave that they've dug in their lives.
Yes. And so they go out, and I think the moment that you needed to like pause at because you couldn't take it anymore was like, she starts talking about how even though she's had, dozens of dogs and currently she has like 12 other dogs, she's like, this is my favorite dog.
They just got a new dog in this episode before the dog died.
She's like, this is my favorite dog. This is, my little buddy. She comes up with the idea on the fly as they're like lowering the dog casket into the grave. She's like, I want to clone him. And so she's like, I need to get some of you have it
mixed up. She takes the fur.
I have it mixed up.
She takes
okay, because she says like, she's like on Instagram. Have you seen this? She's like talking to her kids as they're
standing around the dog coffin.
She's like, on Instagram I've seen like they've, you can take like fur from a pet and they'll turn it into a crystal. I want to do that.
Yeah.
And so she then all the kids are like, okay, Mom, and they all have to turn around because
she says, I brought scissors.
She opens up the dog casket. And you see it on camera. You see her reach into the dead dog who's been dead for days. And the dog is
wrapped in like pea pads.
Yeah, they wrap the dog in pea pads. And then she like cuts off a little thing of the fluff. But then she mentions too that she had the vets like extract some of the dog's sperm so that he could be cloned.
Yep.
They sperm jacked the dog.
It's so bleak, and I think again like the pet stuff is like the most compelling to me, and there's like a moment in this episode where they have like the classic reality TV show format of like confessionals, and it has like people saying what they're thinking, and like one of the daughters, I don't think it's one of the twins, I think it's the other daughter, she says, I'm kind of used to having a dog funeral because we have so many dogs and they always like die, and it just I think it's interesting because it just kind of shows you that like not only are these kids being like raised rich, they're being raised in such a way that like anything that could be like a normal experience of like learning what the process of like a pet dying is like has just been wrapped up in like their mother's like weird consumerist neuroses. Like, sometimes you and I joke that when we have kids, like they'll learn about death when like Rolo dies because they'll be like 10 and he'll be like whatever. And that's like normal. Most people have a pet when they're like between the ages of like 5 and 12 that passes away. These kids have had their whole lives just pets die in front. Like in the documentary, you see a pet die in front of them. It's been their whole life.
The lizard.
The dead lizard. They forgot to feed it for like weeks and it starved to death. They've been watching animals live in their own shit and starve to death their whole lives. Like those kids just have to be like completely fucked up.
Right. Yeah, it's a very weird, macabre little scene. And it is very funny. I like that is the only thing in the show that I think I legitimately just like laughed for a really long time, and I think is worth watching. If you decide to watch the show and you don't think you can stomach the whole thing, just skip to episode 3, the dog funeral.
That just made me think of the barbecued dog from Peep Show.
Yeah. It's just so funny.
It's unreal. It's yeah.
The other thing too in this episode that I wanted to bring up is they talk about and they talk about this with a number of aspects of the house, but I think in particular the moment it really struck me is in reference to the like marble flooring that's supposed to go into the ballroom.
Yes.
Because I think there's two things. First of all, the entire show is filmed and takes place during COVID, and it's never mentioned explicitly, with the exception of the fact that occasionally you'll see like some of the like service staff around Jackie and her family like wearing masks. But besides that, it's like clearly like for them being like uber rich, it's not something that they're gonna let bother them at all, right? Like, and that's part of their privilege. And like anything else, you imagine, especially during that year and during the height of like deaths and stuff, you imagine just like the weird, horrible reality of like having to like wait hand and foot on these like fucking rich people who are just like coughing and doing whatever the fuck they want.
There's one moment that just made me remember, like you said, they don't really focus that much on like the support staff on this, but there is one moment where the person who is described as Jackie's first assistant says like, it's a hard job. We do a lot. It's not just like making the house run. It's also like managing their emotions. And she says this like really sadly as Jackie is like having a meltdown because she didn't fit into a size 10 dress.
Yes.
And it's you get the sense that this lady is just like so fucking miserable. Like she is not getting paid enough to deal with this shit.
Sure. So, that was one thought that I had that was just like, again, it's sort of, they're pretending that it doesn't even exist or whatever. But one of the only times that it really does create like a direct problem that is addressed in the show is they have for the ballroom that they want to have completed by New Year's Eve. There's a realization that they can't have it completed because all of the tiling for the floor of it is stuck in Indonesia.
Yeah.
And the cost of shipping, because of the disruptions caused by COVID, has gone up tremendously, because this is like, the volume of material, it has to be shipped by freight.
Right.
Like, it has to be shipped by, naval freight.
I mean, it's thousands of square feet of marble. Like,
yes. And she brings it up in the context of these tiles, but then also with like a few other materials for the house, is that, again, the scale is such that, and the fact that everything for the house is being made custom, that like I think in the case of those tiles, what she says is they bought a quarry.
Yes, that's right. They
Italy.
bought a quarry.
They bought a quarry like outside of Florence, so all of the marble would match, and then they would have the raw materials shipped from Italy then to Indonesia. And then in Indonesia, they would have it manufactured into the, the tiles themselves. And there's someplace else too where they mention something similar with one marble or one of the other materials where it's like it's from one place and then they source it and then they shipped it to China to have it.
I think it's the same with a lot of the furniture too, because they're having everything like super customized.
Yes. And so what it just like occurred to me there is, and again, this is the stuff that we've talked about on this show before. It's like economies of scale, right? It's like at a certain point, on some ledger, it is cheaper for them to end up shipping all of these like raw materials around the world.
Right.
Because then the labor costs are like cheaper elsewhere, right? To like then manufacture and create and turn it into the thing that it's actually going to be used for the house. And it just like really struck me, like just like think about like what the carbon footprint of this single fucking house is, because it's not just insane. It's not just the case that they're doing this with like the ballroom floor, but it's also that like there's like stuff that they did that for. Like all of the outside of the house is made out of marble, and it's like falling off and crumbling.
I mean, it's falling off to the point where it's dangerous too, by the way.
They're like talking about, we need to replace it now. So they need to do it again. Or if there's like a design choice that they end up like going back on after something's installed, they're like, actually, you know what? Let's redo that. It requires like a fucking international like series
like
of
a
maneuvers.
Network.
Yes, exactly. And it just shows you the weird, like, and the only way that it's addressed in the show is that it's like bothersome to her that now it's become too expensive to get this stuff shipped out of Indonesia.
The fact that she has to deal with like the logistics of it is so annoying to her. Like she really does think she should be able to just like throw money at anything, and it just like happens.
Right. It's to the point of wealth where it's like the weird dreams that you're trying to do are just so impossible and bizarre. And one of the things too, I mean, like, because everything in the house is coming from somewhere else. Like one of the other rooms, and it's covered in some of these early episodes. I forget which one, but one of the rooms she builds into the house is a pub, like an English pub. And again, the origin of that, she explains, is that like her son took her to like one of those like modern speakeasies, and she's like, oh, this is so cute, we should have this in our house. And so in order to accomplish this, she like buys an English pub and then has the parts of it shipped over to the United States. It's like the Gilded Age weirdos that we talked about, like the cloisters and stuff, where they would like go and they would see like a fucking, cathedral somewhere in Europe
and just be
like,
whole thing.
I want that. I want you to tear that down piece by piece and then ship it back to, the United States.
And that reminds me as well of the other part of the English pub that just like killed me. They have this like 150-year-old English telephone booth that for some reason, to get it into the pub, they destroy it. Like they completely rip it apart. This like genuine antique that you can see the wear on it and stuff. They bring it into the house by tearing it apart, which they don't need to because the doors are so big. Later on, you see it's next to a door that's bigger than it. So I don't know why they did that. And they spray paint it red.
Yeah, and it's like a bad spray paint job.
It looks like shit.
Like, the whole point, and then the thing we kept, like, yelling at each other during that is, like, because the idea is that the pub is supposed to have, like, secret door entrances, right? It's supposed to be, like, a cutesy little, like, oh, we have a secret thing in the house, right? And so the telephone booth is supposed to be the secret entrance. It's like, you go into the telephone booth, and then there's, like, a door there. And as you just said, the door frame is bigger than the fucking telephone booth. So if you wanted to do that, like if you had the money, the thing you would do would be like, I want to custom make a steel frame for an old style telephone booth and install it there so that it like fits the exact dimensions of the space that I'm using it in. And it can be, brand new and have all of the bells and whistles and the things I want. But instead, because they wanted to buy an antique telephone booth, they then destroy it. Yeah. And then it doesn't even fucking fit.
Because you can buy like a replica of that for $2,000.
Right.
And it'll be brand new.
Custom made.
Or have one custom made. But instead, like, it's always destroying. Like, there's one point that she jokes about, like, getting really old art and, like, putting their faces on it. Like, she wants the antique things. I guess she associates, like, some kind of, like, prestige with it. But she also, like, doesn't care. There's also the scene, which I think is in the next episode, where she and her mom spray paint these beautiful antique candelabras with this, like, $4 hideous spray paint.
She gets these, like, 18th century golden candelabras from France, right? This sort of height of nobility kind of fucking thing. And I think the price tag, the other thing too in the show is that, which again is just charmless and really not nice, is that every time there's like some object in the show, they do like a ka-ching and then like a price tag on it.
Yes.
And so the candelabras are like $30,000 a piece.
And they just spray paint it in their garage.
Right. Instead of polishing them. Instead of fucking, because, they're old, so they're weathered on the outside.
Yeah,
and instead of polishing, she gets a $5 can of gold spray paint, and she spray paints them, and they look like shit.
And then she says, this is the wrong color.
Yeah, when they're done, she's like, "Oh, I don't like these anymore." And then she gets what you said. What was it? Yankee candles.
Yeah, it just looks like mole
like candles in jar.
Yeah,
candles in jar. Not even like getting like a giant wax, real authentic candle to stick in it. It's just she just puts on top of it like a fucking jarred candle.
Yeah.
All right, let's get through the rest of this before I
4.
have an aneurysm.
Episode 4, first note here, new dog just dropped. Another new dog. You gotta have another one over and over.
Yes.
Hold on, because there was something, I'm sorry to go back, but there was something in episode 3 that I wanted to mention. That is the episode where she talks about 3 of her kids being 1 year apart each and having the exact same birthday. And she makes like a really big deal out of this. And she describes how they like went on vacation somewhere and she like got pregnant each time. And that everybody says they look like triplets, but they're not really triplets. And she like, it's like another one of those things where she's like talking about like how unique and special she is. And it's like very clear to me that she either falsified those birth certificates or must have like induced labor on purpose to have those kids on the same days, which is like purely psychotic. Like, I don't even know what else to say about that. I just thought it was worth mentioning. But then on to episode 4. Again, new dog just dropped. Here there's like a little more with the kids. This is the episode where one of the kids says going on these jets and stuff is just like brushing your teeth.
Right, referring to traveling on private jets.
Because there's multiple times where they show them on like the private jets. They like joke, we're going to need a bigger jet because you guys are getting so tall. Just the whole family like regularly once a week hops on a jet to do stuff like go shopping.
Yeah. I want to talk about this too because this is the episode where they go to Anheuser-Busch.
That's right. They have their little brewery.
And so the impetus, the idea here is that, okay, so we're going to have this like authentic British pub installed in our house. And so if we're going to do that, we want to have our own beer, right? I want to have my own custom beer. And again, Jackie makes this joke of like, everybody thinks, I drink champagne, but I'm just like a small town girl. I want to drink beer. And so
she's wearing the little German outfit.
Yeah, she's wearing like a little lederhosen, whatever,
Is it a dirndl? Is that what it's called?
Yeah. But the point I want to make here is that, like, again, thinking through it.
Yeah.
What if I was a billionaire? What if I had all the money in the world and I could get like a custom beer for my own house? Something unique, right? Something that's like truly special so that when, all of my rich friends or whatever came over, I could serve them something and be like, I had this like handmade, right?
Right.
Like, again, I will never do that. But if I were to do that, my thought would be like, what would be interesting for that would be you would go and you would find, I don't know, a German brewery that's been around since like the fucking 17th century. Some like old artisanal brewery that like, is again sort of has a degree of authenticity to it, something that's been handed down for hundreds of years. Right. And I would ask them to, craft and create something special that's just for me. That is, again, it's like imported and all of this stuff. She goes to the people who make Budweiser, and because she's like friends with them, and she has like them make her a beer, which is like, I'm not a beer snob. But I have, I do enjoy beer. Yeah. I don't give a shit about most of the craft brewery revival stuff. Most of the time I drink beer and I'm like, okay, this is like good, or I don't like it, right? But Budweiser is again, it's like McDonald's. It's not like bad or whatever. Like, I'll drink Budweiser. I don't give a shit. But like, if I was a fucking millionaire, I wouldn't.
Yeah.
What is the? It's the lack of imagination. It's like the wealth without class kind of thing, right?
Yeah.
And we see when she goes there, Billy Bush shows up and. He's like, oh, I like Jackie. We met last year. She's a fun-loving gal. Haha. And it's like clear that this is like, they're trying to like do like I don't know, like the reality TV promotional stuff. And, I could imagine, having not seen a lot of other reality TV shows, it's something like the appeal again of something like, I don't know, like the Kardashians or whatever is like, they're going to meet and they're friends with all these like famous people, right? Like you might see like another celebrity, right? Or like you might see somebody who's sort of famous in the entertainment business on the show or whatever. In this show, it's like hey, did you want to meet Billy Bush? Who the fuck is excited
of the TV show, The Bush Family Brood?
It's like when
apparently they have a fucking TV show too.
There you go. That makes sense. Yeah. But it was like when we were watching Entourage and like Mark Cuban showed up.
Yes.
And it's like, who's fucking excited about this? Who's like, guy. This is so cool.
I love to see D-list celebrities interact with each other.
But the thing is, they're not even celebrities. It's just other rich people. It's just other like uninteresting rich people. You know, it just shows like what that circle is like. You know, when we talk about like, hey, it's a big club and you're not in it. That's what the club is, and it's not even like a fun club.
They're not even.
It's not even like
anything.
A nightclub.
Yeah,
you know, it's just like
that's the other thing that we were talking about a little bit, because I was trying to figure out like, why do I hate this so much when I like other reality TV shows, and like part of it is that like in other shows there are like real celebrities, like on Keeping Up with the Kardashians, they have real celebrities on there sometimes,
right?
And
exactly.
Also you see them like doing like the celebrity parties, or like setting up their like little celebrity businesses or whatever, or like having little drama with other celebrities. In this, it's just rich people shopping and like being like sycophants and being like, you're so wonderful. No, you're so wonderful.
Yeah.
It's nothing. Yes. It's totally vapid. I don't know.
I think, again, just to move us along here in the interest of time, the other stuff in episode 4 that I think is worth mentioning is the big kind of scene is that they go furniture shopping.
Yep.
Even though they already have like a warehouse full of antiques, she needs more shit. And when they get there was one line that we both cracked up about, where they're looking at, I believe it's like these custom chairs, and each one costs like it's like $20,000 a piece.
I think it was 60,000, but yeah,
it's an obscene amount. And they're talking about like, you know, because they're at like a showroom for furniture, for custom furniture. So the idea is like you look at the different stuff and then you can have it customized with all these various options, and depending on what you do, you know, the cost will go up. And so she's like, she brings all of her kids to that, and one of her daughters, she like keeps asking like, what do you think? And the daughter says like, I don't know how much a chair is supposed to cost. It's a learning process for me. And it's just like the exact fucking, you know, the meme from Arrested Development.
Yeah.
You know, like, how much could a banana cost, Michael? $10?
And there's no awareness. Like, she genuinely is saying, like, this is a learning process for me. This is so interesting.
How much could a chair cost?
What could it cost? 100,000?
Yeah. The other thing too here is that when she's talking about, like, I think because the chairs and things they're getting in this particular case, they're talking about designing their dining room, and Jackie starts talking about like her fantasy, and her fantasy is like, she says like, you know, like in movies where you see like the really long dining room table and there's the husband on one end and the wife on the other, and you know, I've always pictured that for me and David, so that like if we were having a fight, we would have a butler who would like be at the thing, and he would like basically go back, because we're so far away from each other that when we're having an argument, we need a butler to like run between us to mediate what we're saying to each other. And I think that also struck me as a sort of like revealing moment of her psychology, because it's
so
like
childlike.
Like all you can imagine is like fighting with your, like, you're not even imagining like fucking like, hey, it's gonna be hot tub city, we're gonna just like be relaxing all the time. It's like, how can I fill my house with gaudy things that then we can fight about?
It's not even, because you could say like, I would have the butler like send my husband a little message saying I love him or whatever, but it's just like deep down she knows that her husband hates her so much that this is the only thing that she can imagine.
There's also speaking to like the largest thing, and you already mentioned it, but at one point in their living room, they're setting up, it's going to be the biggest TV in any residential home in America, and it's like a series of LED panels. It's like 16 feet.
It's not even that big,
feet.
Honestly.
And at one point, Jackie says, "Where else would you find a TV this big? Buffalo Wild Wings." Which again is speaking to the limitations of imagination, right? It's
her dream is to live in a Walmart that has a Buffalo Wild Wings inside of it,
and a Benihana,
right? Yeah,
it's pure like American consumerism distilled. There's no like ambition to use that wealth to like leverage it into some kind of different life.
Right.
It's just like, who could have the most McDonald's?
Right.
Who could have the most Coca-Cola in the world?
Yeah.
Yeah.
It's the real thing.
Yeah.
And at the end of this episode is when we find out that David has pneumonia, and she does the line that I made you rewind. She's like, "I'm scared." But he's been sick this whole time, and now it's pretty dire. She gets like a phone call from Dr. Martin, I think it is, and he's like pretty sick.
Yeah.
Hopefully he'll be dead soon.
Episode 5,
not a lot.
There wasn't a lot really to talk about in this one. The one thing that I thought was funny is that they're doing the Miss Florida for America pageant,
which is like a fake Miss Florida pageant. I think.
Yeah, we had to like keep like looking at it and being like, what? Because at some of the signs just say Miss Florida America, and then some say Miss Florida for America, and it turns out it's just like some phony pageant that they've created, which is clearly like. Because, you know, as we've seen in the documentary and we've talked about elsewhere, like David Siegel is an old pervert.
He's like a Trump guy.
He goes to all the, like, he married Jackie out of one of the pageants. He goes to all the other pageants. He donates a lot of money to the various pageants, and then he hosts events at his house, and he plays grab ass with like the 20-year-old young women. It's so nasty. And stuff
they show it in the documentary.
It's really gross. And it's very clear that, like, you know, if they have like their own little phony pageant or whatever, it's like David's idea. But now since David is sick, she's like there in charge of it. And it's in, you know, it's after all this buildup of like, oh, we got to do this pageant, you know, it's so important. You finally see it. And, you know, again, it's COVID.
It is COVID. Yeah.
But even still, it's like being hosted in the, you know, the like corporate rental space in like a fucking like Marriott, you know, it's like the rec space in a Holiday Inn.
Less than 100 people,
and there's less than 100 people in attendance, and all of the really surreal thing for me was that like all of the contestants on stage had the like plastic see-through COVID masks, so you could like see them smile. Really, really bizarre. Let's move on. Let's
move along.
And so, okay, the final episode. We got a couple of things happening here.
I do want to mention, too, that before this, they did demolish all of the kids' bedrooms as well. Again, going back to... They're finished.
Yes, yeah. Right, because the idea here, too, is that we designed them when they were little kids, and now that they're older, they want, like, more closet space. So
and she talks about putting a stripper pole in her teen son's bedroom, which is really weird and creepy.
Right. Yeah. But again, it's, like, the weird, like, I want to just have all of the things from a strip mall in my house.
Yeah.
You know?
Okay, I'm sorry. I just wanted to mention that. Go on, episode 6.
No, okay, so episode 6. So episode 6 is, like, you know, it's the finale of the season, and, we get some kind of like conclusionary moments. At this point, there's like 3 or 4 rooms finished in the house. And the whole build-up is that, you know, they can't do the New Year's Eve party like they originally planned, but they want to have a New Year's Eve reveal for the dad, who's been sick and off the show for the entirety of this. Basically the whole year he's been in the hospital. And so it all builds up to this like red carpet rollout, where they have him show up, and, you know, the big anticipatory thing is, like, is he going to be mad? Is he going to be, like, angry? You know, he's very ornery, as seen before. He's not, you know, he's not particularly loving in his disposition. And when he finally shows up, he is, like, just on death's door. They take him out of this, like, Rolls Royce. And it's very clear that he is, you know, again, he's 86. He was never a particularly healthy-looking man.
No.
He's dying.
He's definitely dying.
And he's experiencing, like, the beginnings of whatever dementia or just general old age. And all of the fight is more or less taken out of him, and he's just like, oh wow, this all looks great.
He does get animated when he asks, how's the hibachi grill?
I was gonna say that's his only problem. His only problem is he asks about the Benihana grill, and this has been the long thing again throughout the show.
Yes.
Very early on, she's like, okay, I had to nix the Benihana grill, and then she's like, I can't tell my husband.
Yeah.
Then when the husband is finally lucid enough, he's like, where's the Benihana grill? They try to explain it to him.
He's like,
he says, no, we're going to have the Benihana grill. So then she has to go back to the designers again, so to be clear, 20 years ago, they built the house to have the Benihana grill with all these vents and the entire thing. Then they decide to tear it all down.
Yep.
They destroy, again, just millions of dollars worth of work, labor, time, and materials. And then he decides, nope, I want it back.
Yeah.
And so they're like, okay, I guess we're just going to have to build it back.
I guess that'll be a storyline for the next season.
Presumably. And we'll get into whether or not there's a next season of this. But so anyway, at the New Year's Eve thing, one of the moments is like, we're gonna have the kids play the piano for you. This was the impetus towards Jackie going to the warehouse before and getting the piano out of storage. And she's been
playing it up the whole time.
She's been saying
learning
like
to play piano to play for him,
as an exciting little thing. And so he finally gets into that room, and she's like, "We're gonna, all right, kids, like play the piano for Daddy."
And one of the twins just sits down at the piano and she starts playing the Fur Elise really badly.
She plays Fur Elise
like an
really
8-year-old
badly.
the first time playing it, and then the best thing is her brother sits down next to her, and then they start doing chopsticks, but really bad.
Her like 22-year-old brother starts playing chopsticks. And the like, you can just see the fucking like DMT flood of death like coming over David's face, and he's just like, "Wow, that's beautiful.
That's so great, kids." Oh my god, that was the only really funny part of the show for me. I think. It was just so good. It's so delusional.
And so then, the idea is this is like their first, time after almost 20 years they can really spend in the house with a couple of the rooms finished, and then. The very end is like in the confessional, Jackie is like, we got 4,000 square feet of the house done in 1 year, 86,000 to go, haha. And then there's like a real short montage, which looks like a sizzle reel for season 2. Right? It's here are all the other rooms in the house that we need to build. Here are all the other little problems. So it's clear that they've like shot more footage.
There's setting it up for more,
There's more stuff to come. And having watched all of this and being, I would guess, the closest thing to a prime audience for this show, given that we are like, into Jackie and David Siegel insofar as we know their lore, we want to see what's going to happen. I'm genuinely curious about the house. I think it's an open question. About where the show goes from here, because the one other thing too I wanted to mention that really comes together in the final episode is that when they're designing the furniture a little bit earlier on, when they're looking at the tables, one of the things that they're talking about is like making a family crest. And the idea is like we want to emulate, because since we're getting this thing from Versailles, we're this sort of original idea, we want to emulate royalty.
And she says that she's related to King Henry III.
Yeah, she tries to make a claim that like through some distant relatives, like, she has like some relationship to European nobility. And so they make this like gaudy, weird crest, and then it's like on all of their like plates and silverware, and they want to get it like, carved into all these chairs. And she starts talking about like, towards the end of the show, this idea that the reason why she wants to like finish this house is that she wants it to be in her family for generations. And more than once, she starts putting out numbers, and she says like 500 years from now, I want like my descendants, my family to like be in this house. And like we were both looking at each other when she said that, and we're like,
so sad.
1,000-year Reich of like dead dogs, like
dead dog
ordaining
dynasty.
the dead dog dynasty. But it's like it's such a weird delusion, and
because she has the big thing is she has the portrait of herself made to match the portrait of David. And she says that in that last episode, she's like, wouldn't it be so great if in like 500 years, our great, 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 great grandkids are sitting here eating, and they like are looking at the portraits of us, and they're like, that's our crazy grandparents or whatever. And she starts to get like slightly pensive and like looks off to the side, and she's like, that would be really great if they like remember us. And it's just that was like the one, like that was the type of moment that Lauren Greenfield would like pull more out of, I think.
Yes,
because
yes,
it's that's like the revealing thing. Like she's so afraid of getting old and dying and being forgotten
and being irrelevant
and she views, you know, having the Buffalo Wild Wings TV and a McDonald's in her house as like her ticket to like having a legacy, which is just like
right.
I don't even
And the only kind of interesting thematic thing that's even in the show, which I believe is probably unintentional, is that the whole thing is sort of overshadowed with this like impending death of David.
Yes.
And it's like very clear that you know, he's not long for this world, and that like he probably won't see the house finished. And realistically, I don't even know if the house will ever be finished in any meaningful sense. Even though Jackie obviously is quite a lot younger than David and will probably live for quite some time, given the amount of money and stuff, just with all of the bizarre decision-making, the amount of time that it's taken, I doubt it'll ever be done, which, like, there's something, again, in the Ozymandias quality to it, right? It's like, it is like this testament to, like, gross excess and wealth, and you know, there's, like, in terms of the time scale of thinking, like, 500 years from now, the other thing that me and you immediately both said is, like, you know, within, like, 100 years, even if this house was, like, still around, it would be, like, falling into the sea because of climate change. Yeah. You know, you're building your castle on a swamp. Like, why are you doing this? Like, you know, it's not going to stand the test of time.
No matter what you do, even if you were to like not leave it in like disrepair or whatever, you know.
And at best, you're building like a tomb. You're building a gilded tomb, and that's how it really feels when David is finally there at the end, and they're like eating dinner, and they're all in tuxedos and shit. It really does feel like they've just made their own Titanic to sink in.
It feels very similar to when they're doing like his birthday in the original documentary, except again without any of that like reflective quality.
Right.
Yeah.
And you know, again, I found that interesting because it speaks to this weird ambition of like, after all of that money and wealth is accumulated, like what are the dreams of the super rich? And we've talked about this in a variety of different ways on the show. It's like, what are your ambitions, right? And like, you know, a lot of the times it's like, okay, if I'm super rich, I can do sex crimes. That's easily like half of the rich people we've covered. I could do like sex crimes and get away with it. Or it's, you know, the stupid fantasy stuff of like an Elon Musk, right? Like I can I can use my wealth
to Mars or whatever.
And be this like Ayn Randian fucking, you know, Ubermensch and like take us to the stars through blood. Like that's like one element of it. And for this family, it's just like, what if we could make it so that we have like a Buffalo Wild Wings and a Benihana and like a stripper pole and you know, like what if we could have all of that in like our own giant house that's the biggest house ever, and we'll be remembered forever for being like the people with the biggest house, and it'll last a fucking 1,000 years or whatever. And it's quite sad because again, I think like the other thing to think in terms of that time scale is whether or not this show will even have a season 2.
And I don't think it will. Do you?
I mean, again, it's hard because I'm not a connoisseur of this genre in general. Although I will say the only like notes that I can have to make that prediction is, at least as far as critics go. Mm-hmm. You know, because this show debuted like, I don't know, like 2 months ago or something.
Yeah, I believe so.
And you know, I've been kind of keeping tabs with it to see, because when I found out about it, I was like, oh, for sure, we got to watch this, and I was really excited about like how awful it would be. And all of the reviews that came out that were like really bad. You know, like I all the critical reviews, and I don't know if there's like an audience score or something for it.
I was looking, and there weren't even very many like actual reviewers that even bothered reviewing it. And like for me, one of like the indicators of like it not really doing well is that like most reality shows that end up doing well have like communities around them.
Right, like a subreddit or something.
And this
right?
does not, this does not have that. When you look up like Queen of Versailles Reigns Again Reddit, all the stuff is about like the original documentary. Like people have posted about that. There's not like any like buzz around this.
Right, like the only reason I found out about it is because I'm a weirdo and we do this particular show, and I was like looking up the Siegels, and this was like the bit of news that came up for them this year that this was coming out.
Yeah.
But I didn't see like ads for it or whatever. Again, I'm probably not like the target demographic for this show to begin with.
Sure.
But it is really hard to imagine who's watching this. And I guess the other question is like, obviously it's like on Discovery Plus. But like, I mean, it might continue in some form as like a pure vanity project.
I mean, if she can like fund it, I guess.
Right, if she's financing it. I don't know if there's like outside financing or whatever. I mean, presumably there is if they're distributing the show.
Sure.
But, I mean, maybe she'll just like make a show and put it on like YouTube.
She could. I mean, she has the money to finance it, right?
Aren't her kids are all like on social media now?
Her kids are all social media people.
Like I don't think they have particular ambitions in life.
I think they're probably paid through like one of the many LLCs that they have. Like they're just like given an allowance and they don't work. Like the dad jokes about that at one point, I think in the last episode, about giving them raises or whatever. They're just like all they do is just like travel and shop. And that's it. I
mean, because we talked about it too. One of the things in the original documentary, which was again, about 10 years ago now, when all the kids are at a very young age, and you're watching that and you're thinking like, man, like what is it to be like a little kid, to grow up in this like world? And it's like clearly that like they're sort of neglected and they're very spoiled. And it's like, what's going to become of them? And when you see someone as like a little child, you do feel empathy for them. But now like you return to them and you see them all grown up, and it's like, oh yeah, they're just like rich shitheads now.
I mean, they're
like,
terrible now. Yeah,
that's like they're just like terrible, spoiled, like awful kids.
Yeah.
And they'll probably like. Just like one of them will try to be like an influencer or something.
I mean, one of them they'll just take over like the business, like the timeshare business or whatever.
No. I mean, David's kids from his previous marriage are the ones managing the timeshare thing.
You're
These
right.
kids have no like business, whatever. I think like they mentioned like one or two of them are in college, but they also like they keep talking about like how. That like they're very conscious, and even though they're again, the oldest of them is like 22.
Yeah,
they're like very much aware that like our parents are old, they're gonna die, so we should take charge of like building this house because it's gonna be ours.
One of them explicitly says it. Yeah,
and also one of the kids who's like in college is saying like, I live in a an apartment with like my college roommates and stuff, but like when this house is finished, I would definitely just commute from here, because who wouldn't want to live here? And they all say that. They're like, who wouldn't want to live here? Which is so weird. I mean, again, I guess if you're just super rich, but like even with that kind of money, wouldn't you want to like get away from your parents? Wouldn't you want to like, if you could just like buy your own house at that early age and do whatever you want with your life? But it is like the appeal, like another telling thing just with the kids, a detail we didn't mention at that birthday party that they have, that where it's like the three boys who all have the weird same birthday that you were talking about from like the induced labor. Jackie sets up, they call it like, we're going to have a low-key modest birthday party.
Oh my God.
And then, it shows some shots of it, and it's, still, it obviously costs like fucking $20,000.
The gifts are like $10,000 each alone.
Big pool party with like, all this catering, and you see like there's like fucking 10 people on catering staff, and they're grilling. They have like fucking just like 30 to 50 like choice cuts of steak. They're making fucking lobster, all the whatever, the immediate go-tos in your mind of what is the rich and ostentatious food, right? Mm-hmm. Like that's the buffet spread they have. And then one of the kids is like, I want to get White Castle. And then all of the kids are like, yeah, Mom, actually what we want to eat is White Castle. And she like says, like, oh, I guess I could have saved like $5,000 on the food.
She like made lobster and everything.
And then they get the White Castle instead. Yeah. But again, it's like, it shows that like that, if you had that money, it's still, your ambitions are so low, and it's like it's just a clear representation of being spoiled. And it's a weird thought to think, because again, whether or not there's another fucking season of this show, whether or not this does become a 1,000-year dead dog Reich or whatever. Like, David's gonna die soon. Jackie will probably die at some point.
Yeah.
And then, all this will just be, like, left to their kids, and we'll just, like, that will be something, even if it's not in the news, even if it's not very, like, prominent, like, for the rest of our lives, like, these kids will just be out there existing.
Yeah,
like, growing up and living in this, like,
having
weird
their own
fucking...
kids.
Yeah.
Buying more dogs.
Benihana house.
Killing more dogs.
Yeah. Just
killing
buying
birds.
dogs and slaughtering them.
Yeah.
It'll just be overrun with a weird, exotic wildlife and, like...
They could buy a zoo for less money than they've put into this house.
They probably will eventually just put a zoo on
so
the property. I mean, that's the end goal of it. It'll be like a Joe Exotic kind of zoo. It'll be like stuffed to the brim with exotic animals who are like underfed and dangerous and stuff.
I do want to mention, and that's why, if you notice, I was looking off to the side here. We talked before we were recording about whether they took PPP loans, because I was wondering how they did through the pandemic.
Sure.
And I realized that instead of like looking up their names, I should look up their names on the Sunbiz website instead of on the PPP loan search website, so that I could find the names of their LLCs. And just based on like searching like a dozen of them, they took more than like $1 million in PPP loans. It's hundreds of thousands of dollars, all forgiven, all through all these like random companies they have, like investment companies. They have like car companies, I guess, because I think they collect cars too. I believe that was one of the things that we talked about when we did like the little update. I think they do like car shows or something.
Yes, yeah.
But through like have like several different like legal entities for different pageants that they do, not just the weird like Miss Florida America. It's just like millions of dollars probably. Just
yeah, absolutely.
So that's, I guess,
good. Oh, good.
They also have like the interesting thing, and I would have to obviously spend a little more time on this, and maybe we can talk about it another time. Like, they also have like several construction and like property management companies, and it makes me wonder if they've done any weird like financial maneuvering in order to make it like they're employing the people working on their house through like their own LLC.
Oh, I mean, absolutely. I mean, one of the things that I was thinking about when I was talking about the weird like globalization network of moving all this stuff around, there's almost certainly like one, if not several, companies set up with the explicit purpose of making the house itself,
right?
Like outside of their other business.
Just
dealings.
the fact that they like bought a quarry is like, yes,
it has to be managed through some series of weird financial things. There's like a guy who's shown in the show, and his job is just to be the purchaser.
Right. Yeah.
He's like purchases and acquisitions for the house, and that includes all material, all furniture, everything. Yeah.
It's they probably took out PPP loans to pay those people, so using that money then to pay for their own house.
I mean, it's clear like fraud, right? It's deeply evil stuff, and unfortunately, for us at least, only minorly entertaining.
Yeah, definitely don't watch this.
I mean, the only other kind of thing that I was thinking about that sort of gave me a chuckle is, again, in sort of reflecting on her ambition of this thing lasting 1,000 years or whatever, was thinking about, like, when the climate apocalypse happens, if it doesn't sink into the fucking sea, it'll be just like a warlord's chamber, like it'll be like
it'll be
in
a
a
fortified
Morton
position.
Joe style figure will like take over.
Yes.
And, he'll be at the top and he'll be like, do not, my friends, become addicted to Benihana.
All while knowing that he has a fully operational Benihana kitchen that he benefits from.
They have, like, they've bred the toucans so they can squeeze them for guzzling or whatever.
They just have, like, increasingly deformed clone dogs.
Yeah, he's got, like, he's wearing, like, a sort of primitive series of, like, pelts
it's just
made from all the dead
dogs.
Pomeranians. Yeah. Well, I guess I don't know if we'll bother doing any further updates on the Siegels at this point, if there is a later season, but we will certainly be watching.
Unfortunately,
take that as you will, dear listener. That's it.
Rest in peace, Bear.
Bye-bye.
Bye.